Hey everyone, welcome to another one of our videos. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do the replacement of a Ford airbox and coolant tank combo on my 2014 F-150 Raptor. Same process, exactly the same process will apply to any of the 11 to 14 6.2 F-150s and Raptors, all of the Gen 1 Raptors that are the 6.2 liter. Just same general process applies to a lot of other Ford trucks as well that use the same or similar box, although it varies from vehicle to vehicle. So this box itself, I ended up buying the OEM Ford one. It is part number BL3Z8A080-A. I'll put the link in the video description to this. There's also a Dorman version of it that is significantly cheaper, possibly quite equal quality. I just didn't go for that one. I'm not a huge fan of aftermarket parts unless I know that that supplier is the original equipment supplier. So, got the brand new OEM Ford tank here. Coolant tank and airbox. It's all combined into one unit here. And then I also have a new Motorcraft air filter, part number FA1883. And the reason I'm replacing this is because I noticed whenever I was doing some other work on my truck, this area of the coolant tank is starting to crack on mine. It's not split all the way through yet, but it's starting to crack and craze, and the text that's up on here printed into the coolant tank that talks about what type of coolant to use and so on is kind of flaking off. So it's not super important information, generally speaking, but that deterioration, I don't want to end up having a split happen that ends up going down far enough to actually be a issue as far as a leak goes. So I'm going to go ahead and replace it. Should be pretty straightforward. There's just a few fasteners that have to come loose and this thing pulls right out. So we'll head over to the truck and show you the process. Alrighty, I've sped along the process of video making over here just to make things a little easier, and I've gotten most of the things disconnected, but I'll highlight what we need to do. So, starting off, first step, take a flat blade screwdriver, big one like this, and go ahead and loosen the airbox to intake tube clamp, and then if you have a hose clamp, there's a hose that goes to a nipple on the coolant tank that's back behind here. Loosen that clamp as well. I'm not sure if that's a factory clamp on my truck, but I have one, so that's loosened. Hose taken off, and then the intake tube shoved back here. At that point, we're ready to release the 3 clips that hold in the airbox lid. They're down here. And we can kind of tip and see those. These 3 clips right here that clip in there, there, and back there. We can go ahead and loosen those and lift the airbox lid out. This is what you normally do to get to your air filter, which we can then pull out right here. Mine needs changing, which is why I'm changing it with this. And now that we have all of that out, we can remove the bolts holding in the airbox. You can see those now. This is the nipple that I was talking about earlier that this hose goes to right here. So these 2 bolts, one you can see is removed back there, 13 millimeter, super easy to get to with a ratcheting wrench without removal of anything else. Those bolts come out, and once those bolts are removed, you can see this whole airbox assembly moves. Now, what I did is I put a vacuum cap on the coolant tank. That's to make sure that it doesn't decide to empty its contents all over the place as we remove it from the vehicle. But now at this point, the whole entire coolant tank and airbox assembly is ready to come out. So in order to pull it out, all we need to do is lift straight up. There's some grommets. I'm going to flip these clips out of the way for myself. There's some grommets basically down here in the bottom that some molded protrusions from the airbox actually sink down into. So all we need to do is kind of just pull up to get it loose, and then we just work it out. Make sure not to catch the wiring there. Make sure to work it around the air intake tube. And there's also an extension from the airbox that goes into the fender well that we need to make sure that we accommodate as well. It's a little tricky to wiggle out, but once we get it going, okay, we have the airbox out. So we're going to go ahead and go over to the workbench because we're going to need to transfer the airbox tube over to the new airbox, and once we do that, we'll be ready for reinstallation basically. Alrighty, we're back here on the workbench, and I have the extension piece taken out of the old intake. That was a real pain. You can see I've got some prying marks and everything in there. They'll be hidden once it's installed, but that's a real pain to get out, just a little bit of forewarning. We're also going to need to get out our old clips, and we're also going to need to get out the bushings that go in the airbox. But starting with this, Should be really simple. It's a very tight fit, but we should be able to just kind of smack this into place. Hold this with one hand. There we go. That's smacked into place now. So the extension piece is installed, and now what we need to do is go ahead and get the, like I said, clips taken off and reinstalled, and then the bushings installed over here. So go ahead and pull those off the old airbox and then show you how they install. It'll make sense how they come off, I think, very simply once I show that. Alrighty, we are ready to go ahead and install the last few parts in this thing, saved from the old airbox. Like I said, we've got some bushings. That's these guys right here. Easiest way to do these is to separate the metal from the rubber, which is maybe easier said than done now that I've put them back together. Throw the rubber through and then throw that metal plug back through there. And rinse and repeat on the other side. I'll go ahead and do the other side off camera. And then we've got the airbox clips. So these guys came off. These are a real pain to get off for what they are. Take a lot more force than you'd think. But they go ahead and clip in right here on the front side of the airbox. So we'll see how easy this is to get on. Doable, but not the easiest in the world. There's one. There's two. And there's three. So all three of those clips are on. Those are what hold the top airbox lid on. And now this thing is fully prepped and ready to go back in the truck. So I'm going to go ahead, like I said, get the last bushing in, and then this thing will drop back in on camera. Alrighty, so back in the engine bay, we're ready to go ahead and install the new box. And we'll go ahead and just get those clips flipped over. Get this slid down in here. Don't want to mess with that hood sensor. And then the little snorkel, that extension that we installed, is now tucked through the grommeting back here. And then interestingly, what I noticed is this hose right here, which is the one that goes to the coolant tank, actually has a little clip-in point on the back of the box here, which previously was not being used. I'll go ahead and clip it in there while I can reach it. Oh, interesting. It also has a routing point here. So some of these trucks, I guess, unless my coolant tank was out, just weren't built with the correct routing. But it does appear that, see if I can get that through without a whole bunch of headache and leakage. Yep. It's got a routing point designed for it right there. And it runs around back here. We'll have a routing point, or be able to route, I should say, directly where it needs to go. So we'll go ahead and tuck that down and over. Clip it in on the back side there. And there we go. Not sure that I love that routing, to be honest. I may just route it the way that it was, but for what it's worth, there's some factory routing points that the hose directly clips into, so it was definitely designed for such a purpose. Outside of putting that hose back and figuring out how we're going to route it, all we got to do is push the airbox down to the grommets, which it's aligned with right now, throw the two 13mm bolts back in, and then put a new air filter in, put the top airbox on. So I'm going to go ahead and get it all buttoned up and show you what the finished product looks like. Alrighty, so I figured I'd show this on camera before I have everything reassembled. Figured out how the hose routing's supposed to go. So like I said, mine was just laid, kind of set down in here and laid across the back side of this and went to the port on the coolant tank, which made enough logical sense until I pulled out the airbox and saw the routing channels. And the routing actually makes a lot of sense. So you come off the radiator here, You go through that routing hole right there. There's a cutout that never made any sense to me before in this rubber shield. That's for the hose to kind of pop out so it can clear the corner of the airbox without rubbing. It goes through here into that little clip right there on the back side of the airbox, and it comes up and over and passes through that little pass-through right there directly to the coolant tank. Like I said, makes a ton of sense. So that's how I'm going to leave it routed. That's not pinching anything. It's a pretty nice way to, and clean way to have all of this go through. So now I'm going to go ahead and button everything up, throw the bolts back in, and show you the finished product. Alrighty, we got everything buttoned up now. So I went ahead and, like I said, put the new air filter in, the airbox lid on. The air filter actually fit pretty tightly. Ford, I don't know if they have multiple suppliers for these filters or if they've switched, but the old one was made in Mexico, new one in USA. The new one seals a heck of a lot tighter, which is interesting, probably a good thing. I went ahead and got that down, clips clipped. Those are super tight because the filter's tight. That's done. Everything in the airbox side is completed there. Mass airflow sensor plugged back in. Hose clamp tightened, done. So the only thing that we need to do is fill that coolant tank up to the cold fill range line. I always fill it to the top with a 50-50 mix of coolant. The current standard for this engine is the Ford yellow, which looks pretty darn green, but it's called Ford yellow. Gonna go ahead and fill it up with a 50-50 mix there, and then we're good to go. You shouldn't need to do any bleeding of your cooling system or anything along those lines. Everything should be straightforward there because your radiator cap, as long as you're doing this when the vehicle is cold, which I am and I would recommend, should be closed. So shouldn't lose much, if any, coolant at all. With that, I want to thank you all for watching. Let me know in the comment section if you have any questions down below, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.